It's been 30 years, and I still wake up every morning wondering what might have been. But some things, once they happen, are too big to ignore. There's a story I've kept buried deep inside, something about a creature most would call a myth. I don't care what they call it anymore. This is my truth, and it's about time I told it. I saved something once, something no one should have, and 30 years later, it came back for me. My name is Tom Lawrence. I'm 60 years old now, and I've spent the last 20 years in this cabin by the Stillwater River in the Cascades, making furniture with my hands and keeping mostly to myself. But back in 1993, I was 30, working as a forest ranger in these same mountains. That's when everything changed. It was April 17th, 1993, a Saturday morning. I remember because the radio in my truck was playing that Counting Crows song, Mr. Jones, and I'd just heard on the news that the Waco siege had ended badly 3 days before. The whole country was still reeling from it. I was doing a routine debris check along the river. Spring melt always brought down branches and sometimes whole trees that could dam up and cause flooding downstream. Simple work, the kind that lets your mind wander. The air that morning felt different, though. Heavy. The Douglas firs were still. No wind, but I could feel something pressing against my skin, like static electricity before a thunderstorm. I'd been in these woods long enough to trust that feeling. Something was off. I was maybe a quarter mile from the truck when I heard it. Not the normal sounds of the forest, the chatter of squirrels, the distant drumming of a woodpecker. This was different. A rustling that was too deliberate, too heavy. Then the trees started creaking, these massive pines that had stood for 100 years, swaying like something big was moving through them. My hand went instinctively to the radio on my belt. That's when I heard the splash. I moved toward the sound, pushing through a thicket of salal and Oregon grape. The river was running high, maybe 15 yards across at that point, the water dark and fast from snowmelt. And there, about 20 feet from the bank, was something thrashing in the current. At first I thought it was a bear cub, but as I got closer, squinting against the glare of morning sun on the water, I saw it wasn't. The proportions were wrong, the arms too long, the head too large and oddly shaped. It went under. I didn't think. I just moved, kicked off my boots, dropped my radio and belt, and waded in. The cold hit me like a fist. That mountain water couldn't have been more than 40 degrees. I pushed through the current, feeling the rocks shift under my feet, and dove where I'd seen it go down. The water was murky with sediment. I couldn't see anything. My lungs were already burning from the cold shock. Then something brushed against my hand. Coarse hair. I grabbed hold and kicked for the surface. We broke through together, and I got my first clear look at what I'd pulled from the river. It was young, maybe 3 feet tall, covered in dark brown fur that was almost black when wet, with lighter streaks along its shoulders and back. The face. Jesus, the face. It wasn't human, but it wasn't animal either. Somewhere in between. Large eyes, deep brown with whites showing, a flat nose, a mouth that was open, gasping, showing small white teeth. The eyes met mine, and in that instant I saw something I'll never forget. Intelligence, fear, understanding. This wasn't a bear cub or a deformed ape or anything I'd learned about in my forestry degree. This was something else entirely. Something that looked at me and knew I was trying to help. Something that was scared and pleading and completely, impossibly real. I hauled us both to the bank, my arms shaking from cold and adrenaline. The creature, I didn't know what else to call it, was breathing hard, coughing up water. It didn't fight me. It held onto my shirt with these small, almost human hands, 5 fingers on each, nails instead of claws. We lay there on the muddy bank for maybe 2 minutes, both of us just trying to breathe. The sun was warming my back. I could hear a Steller's jay calling somewhere upstream. And I was holding something that shouldn't exist. A baby Bigfoot. That's what ran through my mind, ridiculous as it sounds. All those campfire stories, all those grainy photos in the tabloids at the grocery store checkout, all the late-night TV specials I'd half-watched while eating dinner alone. And here I was, dripping wet and freezing, with living proof shivering in my arms. The creature made a sound then, not a growl or a roar, a whimper, high-pitched and scared, like a child. It looked up at me with those brown eyes, and something in my chest cracked open. I'd lost my wife, Sarah, 3 years before. Cancer? She'd been gone by the time she was diagnosed, really. 6 weeks from first symptom to funeral. We never had kids, never got the chance. And here I was, holding something small and vulnerable, and completely dependent on me to keep it alive. I should have called it in. That was the protocol. Unknown animal species, potential danger, all of that. I had the radio right there, 20 feet away in the grass where I'd dropped it. I could have called dispatch, had a team out here in an hour. Scientists, researchers, people who knew what they were doing. But I looked at those eyes again, and I knew what would happen. This creature would become a specimen, a subject, something to be studied and documented and probably caged. Or worse, if the wrong people found out. Hunters, collectors, the kind of people who would pay anything for proof of something like this. The creature shifted in my arms, pressing closer to my warmth. It was still shivering, still scared, but it trusted me. Somehow, impossibly, it trusted me. I made my decision in that moment. I don't know if it was the right one. I've spent 30 years wondering about that. But I made it. I picked up the creature, wrapped it in my ranger jacket, and carried it to my truck. It didn't struggle. It tucked its head against my chest and made that whimpering sound again, softer now. I could feel its heart beating fast against my ribs. My boots were still by the river. My radio. I'd have to come back for them. Right now, I had to get this thing somewhere safe before anyone else came along. I put it in the passenger seat of my Ford Ranger, turned the heat on full blast, and drove away from everything I thought I knew about the world. You have to understand why I did what I did. It wasn't just about the creature, though God knows that was part of it. It was about me, too. After Sarah died in 1990, I'd become a ghost in my own life. I went through the motions, showed up for my shifts, checked the trails, filed my reports. But I was hollow inside, empty. We'd had plans, Sarah and I. We were going to build a cabin by the river, the place she loved best. We were going to try for kids. We were going to grow old together, watching the seasons change over the water. Instead, I had a small apartment in town that still smelled like her perfume, a job that kept me away from people most of the time, and a silence so deep it felt like drowning. When I pulled that creature from the river, when it looked at me with those eyes and held on to me like I was the only solid thing in a world gone sideways, something woke up inside me. Something I thought had died with Sarah. The need to protect something, to matter to someone, to have a purpose beyond just surviving day to day. I know how that sounds. I know what a psychologist would say about projection, about trying to fill a void, about making catastrophically bad decisions because of unprocessed grief. And maybe they'd be right. But in that moment, driving through the mountains with a baby Sasquatch wrapped in my jacket, I felt more alive than I had in 3 years. I didn't take it to my apartment. Too many neighbors, too many questions about strange sounds or smells. Instead, I drove to the piece of land Sarah and I had bought before she got sick. 15 acres of forest with a quarter-mile of river frontage, about 40 minutes from the nearest paved road. We'd picked out the spot for the cabin, cleared some brush, but never gotten further than that. I had a storage shed there, 10 by 12, with a wood stove we'd installed for when we worked on the property. It wasn't much, but it was private, remote, safe. The creature had fallen asleep on the drive, exhausted from its ordeal. I carried it inside the shed, laid it on some old sleeping bags, and just watched it breathe. In the dim light coming through the small window, I could see details I'd missed before. The fur wasn't uniform. It was coarser on the back and shoulders, softer on the belly and inner arms. The hands were remarkable, with a thumb that opposed the fingers just like ours. The feet were large, disproportionate to the body, with thick calluses on the soles. It slept for 6 hours. I sat there the whole time, watching, thinking about what the hell I was going to do next. When it woke up, those brown eyes opened and found me immediately. There was a moment of panic. It jerked upright, looked around the unfamiliar space. But then it seemed to remember. The river, the rescue, me. It made a soft sound, almost questioning, and tilted its head. "Hey," I said quietly. "You're okay. You're safe here." It watched my mouth as I spoke. Then, incredibly, it tried to mimic the sound. Not words, but the cadence, the tone. A soft vocalization that had the same rhythm as my "hey." I'd brought supplies from my apartment, a jug of water, some bread, a can of tuna. I opened the tuna and offered it. The creature sniffed, wrinkled its nose, that flat nose, more human-looking than I'd realized, and turned away. Right. Why would it eat fish from a can? It was a forest creature. I went outside and found what I could, some service berries that were just starting to ripen. Tender young fern fronds. I brought them back, and this time the creature reached for them immediately, stuffing the berries into its mouth with both hands. It ate like it was starving, and I realized it probably was. How long had it been in that river? Where was its mother? The questions piled up, but I had no way to get answers. What I did have was a decision to maintain. I'd made my choice when I drove away from that riverbank. Now I had to live with it. Over the next week, I established a routine. I'd show up for my ranger shifts, do my work, file my reports. Normal, professional. No one suspected anything. Then I'd drive to the property and spend every spare hour with the creature. I brought it food, more berries, nuts, roots I'd dug up, even some vegetables from the grocery store. Carrots became a favorite. I'd watch it eat, sitting cross-legged on the floor of that shed, and marvel at the delicacy of its movements. It would peel the outer layer of bark from roots with its fingernails before eating them. It would sort through a handful of berries, eating the ripest ones first. It learned quickly. By the third day, it had figured out that I came and went, but always returned. It stopped showing fear when I opened the door. By the fifth day, it would come to me when I arrived, making that soft, questioning sound that seemed to mean hello, or maybe you're back. I started calling it the kid in my mind. Not a name exactly, but better than it, or the creature. The kid felt right somehow, like acknowledgement without claiming ownership. The kid grew fast, visibly fast. By the end of that first month, it was noticeably taller, maybe 3.5 feet. The fur was filling in thicker, and the proportions were changing. The legs were getting longer, the shoulders broader. I reinforced the shed, added a better lock, insulated the walls. I told myself I was just making the kid comfortable, but really, I was building a cage. A nice cage, a safe cage, but still a cage. That thought kept me up at night. In June, I had my first close call. My supervisor, Pete Jennings, wanted to do a site check of some properties in the area. He'd heard I owned land out this way and asked if he could swing by, have a look at what I was planning to build. I met him at the turnoff to my property, told him the road was washed out further in, we'd have to walk. He bought it. We never got within a 1/4 mile of the shed, but my hands were shaking the whole time, and that night I lay awake wondering what the hell I was doing. The kid needed more than I could give it in that shed. More space, more stimulation, more of whatever a young Sasquatch needed to grow up properly. But I couldn't let it go. Every time I considered it, I'd think about hunters, about researchers with tranquilizer guns, about the kid in some lab somewhere, terrified and alone. So I kept it. I kept the secret. And every day the weight of that choice got a little heavier. By the fall of 1993, I'd started construction on the cabin Sarah and I had planned. I told people it was time. that I needed to move on. Really, I needed a better place to hide the kid. I designed it with 2 rooms, the main cabin where anyone could see, and a back room that I told contractors was going to be storage. I made sure to finish that room myself after they'd gone. Reinforced walls, a door that locked from the outside, a small window high up that let in light but couldn't be seen from any approach to the property. Clinton was president, the X-Files had just started on TV, and everyone was talking about aliens and government conspiracies and things that went bump in the night. I'd watch the show sometimes alone in my apartment, thinking about the real conspiracy sitting in a shed on my property. The kid moved into its room on November 12, 1993, 7 months after I'd pulled it from the river. It was nearly 4 feet tall now, stronger, more coordinated. When I opened the door to show it the new space, it looked around with what I can only describe as wonder. More room to move. A real bed I'd built from cedar, windows it could look through. It made a sound I hadn't heard before, a series of soft hoots, low and resonant, almost musical. I didn't know what it meant, but the tone felt like approval, maybe even happiness. I started spending nights there. I'd finish my ranger shifts, grab dinner in town, usually the diner on Main Street where you could get a burger and fries for $4.95, then head out to the cabin. I'd work on finishing the main room, installing the wood stove, hanging drywall, and the kid would watch through the gap under its door, those brown eyes tracking my every movement. Sometimes I'd talk to it, just normal stuff, about my day, about Sarah, about the forest. I don't know how much it understood, but it would listen. It would make soft sounds back, like it was participating in the conversation. One evening, in December, the first real snow of winter falling outside, I was eating dinner in the main room. Chili from a can, heated on the wood stove. The kid was making sounds in its room, more insistent than usual. I opened the door and it pushed past me, walked right into the main room like it owned the place. My heart stopped. This was it. The moment I'd lose control. The kid would run or attack or do something that would force me to make a choice I didn't want to make. Instead, it walked to the wood stove, held its hands out to the warmth, and made that soft hooting sound again. Contentment? It had been cold, and it had known there was warmth on the other side of that door, and it had simply asked for what it needed. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Okay," I said. "Okay, you can stay out here, but you have to go back when I say. Deal?" It looked at me, tilted its head, and I swear to God it nodded. That was the night everything changed. The kid wasn't a secret I was keeping anymore. It was I don't know what to call it. A roommate? A companion? A responsibility that felt more like a relationship than a burden? We fell into a new routine. During the day, when there was any chance of visitors, the kid stayed in its room. But at night, it had the run of the cabin. It would explore, touching everything, picking things up and examining them. It was particularly fascinated by reflective surfaces. I had a small mirror on the wall, and the kid would stand in front of it for long minutes, studying its own reflection, making faces, watching how the reflection changed. It learned by observation. I'd stack firewood, and the next day I'd find the kid had reorganized the stack more neatly than I'd done it. I'd prepare food, and the kid would watch intently, memorizing each step. One morning, I woke to find it had arranged the items on the counter in a precise line: can opener, coffee mug, spoon, bowl, in the exact order I used them for breakfast. The intelligence was undeniable. This wasn't animal behavior. This was problem-solving, planning, understanding cause and effect. In March of 1994, a year after the rescue, I came home to find the kid had opened its door from the inside. I'd installed a simple latch, nothing complicated, thinking that would be enough. The kid had apparently watched me open it enough times to figure out the mechanism. The latch was undone, the door ajar. Panic hit me. I searched the cabin, the property, my heart pounding. It was gone. I'd lost it. Then I heard a sound from the river. that soft hooting call. I found the kid at the water's edge, exactly where I'd pulled it out a year before. It was just sitting there, looking at the current, its hand trailing in the cold water. When it heard me approaching, it turned and made that questioning sound. Not scared, not running, just visiting a place it remembered. I sat down next to it. We stayed there for maybe 20 minutes, watching the river flow past. The kid leaned against me, its shoulder warm against mine through my jacket. It was bigger now, nearly 5 feet tall, the muscles developing in its arms and back. Not a baby anymore. "I know you remember," I said quietly. "I know you understand more than you let on." The kid made a soft sound, not questioning this time, acknowledging. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing," I continued. "Keeping you here, hiding you. Maybe you should be with your own kind, your mother, your family. But I don't know how to find them, and I'm scared what would happen if I tried." The kid turned its head and looked at me with those deep brown eyes. Then it did something it had never done before. It reached out and put its hand on mine. The fingers were long, slightly webbed between the first and second joints. The palm was calloused and warm. It was the most deliberate gesture of connection I'd experienced since Sarah's death. We sat there until the sun set behind the mountains, and then we walked back to the cabin together. The years that followed developed a rhythm. The kid grew. I grew older. The secret remained buried. By 1995, the kid was my height, about 5'10". The features were more defined now, more adult. The brow ridge was prominent, the jaw strong. The fur had darkened to a deep chocolate brown, almost black in low light, with silver starting to show around the muzzle. If I was being honest, it looked male, though I had no way to be certain. I'd finished the cabin, moved out of my apartment completely, told people I needed the solitude, needed to be closer to nature. Nobody questioned it. I was the weird guy who'd lost his wife, building a life alone in the woods. It fit the narrative everyone had already written for me. But I wasn't alone. The kid was there every evening, every night, every morning before I left for work. We'd established routines, rituals. Coffee for me, a bowl of oats and berries for the kid. I'd read the newspaper out loud, and the kid would listen, head tilted, like it was trying to understand not just the words, but their meaning. Sometimes I'd play music, an old tape deck I'd hooked up, running on batteries. The kid loved music, would sway to it, move in ways that weren't quite dancing, but weren't not dancing either, particularly like Johnny Cash. Wholesome Prison Blues would get the kid rocking back and forth, and I'd catch myself smiling, feeling something like joy. But there were close calls. In August of 1995, a neighbor from 2 miles down the road, a guy named Bill Hoskins who ran a small Christmas tree farm, decided to go for a hike on my property. Said he'd seen a deer trail that looked promising, wondered if I minded if he followed it. I minded very much, but I couldn't say that. So I walked with him, making sure we stayed far from the cabin, talking loudly the whole time. The kid was smart enough to stay hidden, stay quiet. We passed maybe 100 yards from the cabin, and I saw the tracks in the mud. Large tracks, unmistakable. Bill saw them too. Stopped, crouched down. "That's a hell of a bear print." It wasn't, but I nodded. "Yeah, saw a big black bear through here last week. Probably should post some warning signs." He stood up, suddenly less interested in hiking. "Maybe I'll stick to my own property." Probably smart, I agreed. That night, I sat the kid down. "You have to be more careful," I said. "Stay closer to the cabin. Don't leave tracks where people might see them." The kid looked at me with an expression I'd learned to read. Frustration. It wanted to roam, to explore. The property was 15 acres, and that wasn't enough anymore. The kid was growing, maturing, and with that came instincts I couldn't fully understand or control. "I know," I said. I know this isn't fair to you, but it's the best I can do." The kid made a sound, low, resonant, almost mournful. Then it went to its room and closed the door. I sat alone in the cabin that night, drinking whiskey I'd bought at the general store in town, wondering what the hell I was going to do. The kid was getting too big, too restless. Sooner or later, someone was going to see something they couldn't explain away. And then what? I didn't have an answer. By 1997, the kid was enormous, 6.5 feet tall, shoulders like a linebacker, arms that could probably lift twice my weight. The face had matured too, becoming less human-looking as the features settled into their adult proportions. The brow ridge was heavy, the jaw massive, the canines slightly pronounced. But the eyes were still the same. Still brown, still intelligent, still capable of expressing emotions I could read as clearly as words on a page. We'd developed a language of sorts, not words exactly, but sounds and gestures that had consistent meanings. A low hoot meant contentment. A sharp bark meant alarm or warning. A series of clicks meant curiosity or question. The kid would point at things and make that clicking sound, and I'd tell it what they were, what they did. I don't know how much of the actual language it understood, but it understood the communication, the exchange, the sharing. I'd stopped working as a ranger in 1996, took early retirement at 33, citing stress and needing a change. Really, I needed to be closer to the property full-time. The kid was too unpredictable, too intelligent. I couldn't leave it alone for 8-hour shifts anymore. I started doing carpentry instead. Custom furniture, cabinets, small renovation jobs. Work I could do on my own schedule. That gave me an excuse to be home most of the time. Business was decent. People liked the idea of the solitary craftsman in the woods, making things with his hands. They didn't know about my apprentice watching from the window of the back room, learning every cut, every joint, every technique. The kid had become fascinated with woodworking, would watch me for hours, those brown eyes tracking the movements of saw and chisel and plane. I started leaving. Tools in its room, nothing with a motor, just hand tools. One morning, I found the kid had carved something. A small figure, maybe 6 inches tall, rough but recognizable. A human. Me, I think. Standing with one hand raised, like waving or reaching out. I kept it on my workbench after that. A reminder that this thing I was hiding, this secret that ate at me every day, was also creating art, expressing itself, thinking about relationships, and representing them in physical form. In 1999, as the world worried about Y2K and computer crashes and the end of civilization as we knew it, my worry was much more immediate and personal. The kid had started disappearing at night. I'd wake up at 2, 3 in the morning, and the back room would be empty. I'd find tracks leading into the forest, heading up the mountain. Sometimes the kid would be back by dawn, sometimes not, until the following evening. It was becoming wild again. Or maybe it had always been wild, and I'd just been pretending otherwise. The first time it happened, I panicked, searched the property, calling out in the darkness, wondering if this was it, if the kid was finally leaving for good. But it came back. It always came back, and each time it seemed changed somehow, more confident, more itself. I realized I was losing it, not because it was running away, but because it was growing up, finding its own path. And I had no right to stop that process, no matter how much it hurt. On New Year's Eve, as 1999 turned to 2000, and the computers didn't crash and the world kept turning, the kid came to me in the main room. It had been gone for 3 days this time, the longest yet. It walked up to where I was sitting by the fire, stood there looking down at me, and made a sound I'd never heard before. Deep, resonant, complex. Multiple tones layered together, like a chord played on an instrument I couldn't name. It went on for maybe 10 seconds, and in those seconds I heard something like gratitude, like farewell, like love. Then the kid touched my shoulder, gently, carefully, aware of its own strength, and walked out the door into the darkness. It was gone for 2 weeks. I thought I'd never see it again. But on January 15th, 2000, the kid came back. Not alone this time. With it was another Sasquatch. Larger, broader. Female, I thought, based on the proportions, though I couldn't be sure. This one kept its distance, stayed at the tree line, but it was there, watching, assessing. The kid looked at me, looked at the other Sasquatch, then back at me. The message was clear. This is my world. This is my family. But you're part of that too, somehow. I wanted you to know. They left together, and I understood. The kid had found what I'd been keeping it from. Its own kind, its own life. Everything I'd been too scared to let happen, happened anyway. For months after that, I didn't see the kid at all. Spring came, then summer. I worked on my furniture orders, maintained the cabin, lived my quiet life. The solitude felt different now, heavier. I'd gotten used to the presence, to the companionship, to having something to care for. Then, in September of 2000, the kid returned. Alone this time. Bigger than ever, probably 7 feet tall, the body thick with muscle. But the approach was cautious, almost tentative, like it wasn't sure it was still welcome. I was outside, splitting wood for winter. I heard the footsteps before I saw anything. Heavy, deliberate. I turned, axe in hand, and there it was. "Hey," I said, same word I'd used that first day in the shed, 7.5 years ago. The kid made that soft, questioning sound, the one that meant hello, or you're back, or maybe just we're okay, right? I put down the axe. "Yeah," I said. "We're okay." The kid moved closer, reached out and took the axe, gently, carefully. Then it started splitting wood. Perfect, clean strikes, the kind that come from watching someone do something 1,000 times and understanding not just the motion, but the purpose. We worked together until the sun went down. The kid stayed that night, sleeping in its room like old times. In the morning, it was gone again. But now I understood the pattern. The kid had its own life, its own world, its own family probably. But it came back to check on me, to make sure I was okay, to maintain the connection we'd built over all those years. It had become something like a son. Not mine, not really, but connected to me in ways that went deeper than biology. By 2005, these visits had become routine. The kid would show up every few months, stay a few days, help with whatever project I was working on, then disappear back into the forest. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of other Sasquatch in the distance, never close, never threatening, but present, watching over their own. That fall, everything almost fell apart. I was working on a cabinet commission for a client in town when I heard the gunshot. Close, too close. Then another. I ran outside. 2 hunters were on my property, maybe 50 yards away, both carrying rifles, both pointing up the ridge behind my cabin. "Did you see it?" one of them shouted to the other. "Biggest damn bear I've ever seen," the other replied. "Had to be 800 pounds. My blood went cold. I walked toward them, forcing calm into my voice. "This is private property. You're going to need to leave." "Sorry, man, we didn't know." The first hunter lowered his rifle. "We were tracking something, and it led us here. You got one hell of a bear up there?" "Yeah, well, it's my bear on my land, and I don't allow hunting here." I gestured toward the road. "You need to go, now." They left, grumbling about property rights and public forest boundaries. I watched until they were out of sight, then ran up the ridge. The kid was there, pressed against a large cedar, breathing hard. There was blood on its shoulder. Not much, but enough to see it had been grazed by a bullet. "Jesus," I whispered. "Jesus, I'm sorry." The kid looked at me with those brown eyes, and for the first time, I saw something like accusation there. This was my fault. I'd created a situation where it wasn't safe, where its very existence put it in danger. I had medical supplies in the cabin. Basic stuff, but better than nothing. I gestured for the kid to follow me. It hesitated, then came. I cleaned the wound as best I could. It wasn't deep, more of a graze, but it had to hurt. The kid sat there and let me work, never making a sound of pain. When I was done, I wrapped it with gauze and tape. "You can't come here anymore," I said. "It's not safe. Those hunters could come back, could bring friends. I can't protect you from that." The kid made that mournful sound again, the one I'd first heard years ago when I tried to restrict its movements. "I know," I said. "I know you want to check on me, but I'd rather never see you again than see you shot. Do you understand?" The kid stood up, looked around the cabin one more time. Then it did something it hadn't done since it was small. It leaned down and pressed its forehead against mine. The fur was coarse, the skin underneath warm. We stayed like that for a long moment. Then the kid left. And for 5 years, I didn't see it again. Those were hard years, the loneliest of my life, and I'd had plenty of practice at lonely. I kept working, kept living, kept the cabin maintained. But the purpose was gone. The kid had been my reason for being here, my reason for building this life in isolation. Without that, I was just a man alone in the woods, making furniture nobody really needed, growing old by himself. In 2008, at 45 years old, I seriously considered leaving, selling the property, moving to town, maybe even moving to a different state entirely. Starting over somewhere, the memories weren't quite so heavy. But I couldn't do it. This place, this cabin, this forest, it was where Sarah and I had planned our future. It was where I'd saved the kid. It was where I'd spent the best years of my adult life, strange as that might sound. I couldn't walk away from that. So I stayed. And I waited, though I didn't really know what I was waiting for. Then, in March of 2010, on a gray, drizzly morning that reminded me of the day I'd pulled the kid from the river 17 years before, I heard the footsteps outside. Heavier than I remembered. Slower. More deliberate. I opened the door, and there was the kid. Massive now, probably 8 feet tall, the shoulders impossibly broad. The face was grizzled, silver showing in the beard and around the muzzle. The kid wasn't a kid anymore. It was fully adult, mature, powerful, but the eyes were the same, still brown, still intelligent, still capable of communicating more than words ever could. "You're okay," I said. It wasn't a question. I could see the old wound had healed completely, leaving just a small patch of lighter fur on the shoulder. The kid made that soft hooting sound. Contentment. "I'm home." It didn't stay long, that time, just a few hours, helping me repair a section of the porch that had rotted over the winter, working side by side like we used to, falling into the old rhythm without effort. Before it left, the kid went to the workbench, picked up the small carved figure, the one it had made all those years ago, looked at it, then at me. Then it set the figure down carefully and walked out into the rain. The message was clear. I'm still here. We're still connected. But my life is out there now, not in here. And I understood. Finally, completely, I understood. This had never been about keeping the kid. It had been about letting it grow, about providing safety when it was vulnerable, then stepping back when it was strong. I'd done that. Whatever mistakes I'd made, whatever moral lines I'd crossed, I'd done that one thing right. The visits continued. Less frequent now, sometimes years apart, but consistent. The kid would show up, spend a little time, then disappear back into the wilderness. Each time it seemed a little older, a little more grizzled. Each time I was a little older too, a little grayer, a little more aware of my own mortality. In 2015, I turned 52. My hands were starting to develop arthritis. The cold bothered me more than it used to. I'd started thinking about what would happen to this place when I was gone. Who would maintain it? Who would know its history, its secrets? The kid showed up that winter during a heavy snowfall. Must have been 3 feet of powder on the ground, more falling every hour. I had a fire going, was drinking coffee, and reading a Louis L'Amour Western I'd picked up at the thrift store in town. The door opened. I'd stopped locking it years ago, at least when I was home, and the kid walked in, covered in snow, looking like some kind of yeti from a storybook. We spent 3 days together during that storm. Couldn't have gone outside if we wanted to. The kid slept in its old room, and I slept in mine, and during the days we just existed together. I worked on a small jewelry box commission. The kid watched, occasionally making that clicking sound when it had a question. On the third day, when the snow finally stopped and the sun came out, the kid didn't leave immediately. Instead, it walked around the cabin, touching things. The walls it had watched me build, the furniture it had helped me make, the window where it used to watch me work. Then it went to the back room. Its room. Stayed in there for maybe 20 minutes. When it came out, it was carrying something. Another carving. This one was more sophisticated than that first figure from years ago. It showed 2 figures, one tall, one short, standing side by side. The kid set it on the mantel above the fireplace, looked at me, and in that look was everything: gratitude, love, goodbye. "You're not coming back, are you?" I said quietly. The kid made a sound I'd never heard before, complex, layered, sad, but also resolved. It touched my shoulder one more time, then walked out into the brilliant white world. I watched from the window as it moved up the ridge, its tracks deep in the fresh snow. At the tree line, it stopped, turned back, raised one massive hand in what could only be described as a wave. Then it was gone. For 8 years, I didn't see the kid. I assumed it had died or moved on to a territory far from here, or simply decided our time together was complete. I made my peace with that, or tried to. I kept working, kept the cabin maintained, kept living a quiet life that most people would find unbearably lonely. But I had my memories. I had the carvings on the mantel. I had the knowledge that for nearly 20 years I'd been part of something extraordinary. Then on April 17th, 2023, exactly 30 years to the day after I pulled that small, wet figure from the Stillwater River, I heard the footsteps again. I was 60 years old by then, fully gray, slower. The arthritis made woodworking difficult, though I still did it when I could. I'd been thinking about selling the place, moving into one of those senior communities in town where you don't have to worry about maintaining a property in the wilderness. But on that April morning, 30 years later, everything changed one more time. The footsteps were slower now, heavier. When I opened the door, I barely recognized what I saw. The kid was ancient, grizzled. The fur was almost entirely silver, the face deeply lined. It moved carefully, like every step hurt. One eye was clouded, probably from a cataract. The massive shoulders were slightly hunched. But the good eye found mine, and in it I saw everything I remembered. The intelligence, the emotion, the connection. "Jesus," I whispered. "Look at us, a couple of old men." The kid made a sound, soft, weak, nothing like the powerful vocalizations of its prime. It took a step toward me, stumbled slightly, caught itself. I moved forward, wrapped my arm around its massive torso, as much of it as I could reach, and helped it into the cabin. The kid went straight to the back room. Its room. Lay down on the old cedar bed I'd built decades ago, the frame creaking under the weight. I brought water, food. The kid drank a little, ate nothing. We stayed like that for 3 days. Me sitting beside the bed, the kid lying there, breathing slow and labored. Sometimes it would open that good eye and look at me. Sometimes it would make soft sounds, like it was trying to tell me something. On the 3rd day, I understood what was happening. The kid had come here to die, had traveled God knows how far, through God knows what pain, to get back to this place, to the room where it had been safe, to the presence of the one other being in the world who knew its whole story. "It's okay," I said, my hand resting on its shoulder, feeling the rise and fall of its breath. "You can rest now. You don't have to fight anymore." The kid made that complex sound again, the one I'd heard only a few times in all our years together. Multiple tones layered, almost like speech, like it was trying to say everything it had never been able to say. I stayed with it all that day and through the night. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, the breathing changed, became shallower, more irregular. I leaned close. "Thank you," I said, "for trusting me, for coming back, for letting me be part of your life. You saved me too, you know. After Sarah died, I was just going through the motions. But you gave me purpose. You gave me something to care about, something to protect, and that kept me alive." The kid's good eye opened one more time, looked at me with perfect clarity. Then it made the smallest sound, that soft, questioning vocalization from all those years ago, the one that meant hello or you're back or we're okay, right? "Yeah," I said, my voice breaking. "We're okay." The kid's eye closed. The breathing stopped. I sat there until dawn, my hand on its shoulder, feeling the warmth slowly fade from its body. 30 years. From a 3-foot baby struggling in the river to this massive, ancient being dying peacefully in the cabin I'd built for it. The full circle of a life I'd been privileged to witness. When the sun came up, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't report this. Couldn't let scientists or researchers or anyone else turn the kid into a specimen. This secret had to stay secret. I wrapped the body in canvas. It took me most of the day to dig a grave deep enough, up on the ridge where the kid used to go, where I'd first seen those other Sasquatch all those years ago. My back screamed in protest with every shovelful of dirt, but I didn't care. I buried the kid at sunset, marked the spot with a cairn of river stones, nothing that would attract attention, but enough that I'd always be able to find it. Standing there in the fading light, looking at those stacked stones, I felt something I hadn't felt in 30 years. Peace. Complete, profound peace. The kid's life had been wild and free, except for those years when it needed protection. I'd given it that protection, then I'd let it go. And at the very end, it had chosen to come back to me. Had trusted me one final time. Whatever I'd done wrong in my life, and there was plenty, I'd done that one thing right. I'm telling this story now because I'm 60 years old, and the doctors say my heart isn't what it used to be. I've got maybe 5 years, maybe 10 if I'm lucky. And I realized that when I die, the truth dies with me. For 30 years, I've kept this secret. Told no one. Protected something that the world said couldn't exist. And maybe that was selfish. Maybe researchers could have learned something important from the kid. Maybe science was robbed of a crucial discovery because one lonely man decided his need for connection was more important than knowledge. I don't know if I made the right choice. I've lived with that question every day since April 17, 1993. Some mornings, I wake up certain I did the right thing. Other mornings, the doubt is crushing. But I know this. For nearly 30 years, I was part of something extraordinary. I witnessed intelligence and emotion in a creature that wasn't supposed to exist. I watched it grow from a frightened baby into a powerful, dignified adult. I experienced a bond that transcended species, that taught me things about connection and love and letting go that I never could have learned any other way. The kid changed me, made me better, gave me purpose when I had none, taught me that protection isn't about control, it's about providing safety until safety is no longer needed. I still have the carvings on my mantle. The first one, rough and simple. The second one, more sophisticated. 2 figures standing side by side. That's all that's left now, besides my memories and a cairn of stones on a ridge where wildflowers bloom every spring. People ask me sometimes why I stay out here alone, why I don't move to town, join a community, find some companionship in my old age. I tell them I like the solitude, like the forest, like the work. That's all true. But the real reason is that this place holds something irreplaceable. This cabin, this river, this forest, they're where the most important relationship of my life happened. Where I learned that connection isn't limited by species or language or even logic. Where I discovered that sometimes the most profound love comes from the most unlikely sources. I'll die here, probably. And when I do, someone will find this place, this cabin in the woods, with its strange back room and its thick walls and its mantel full of mysterious carvings. They'll wonder about the old man who lived here, what his story was, what he was hiding. Let them wonder. Some secrets are worth keeping even after death. But I wanted to tell it once, to say out loud what I've known for 30 years. Bigfoot is real. At least one was. And it was beautiful and intelligent and capable of love. And for a brief, impossible period of time, it was mine to protect. Not mine to own. Never that. But mine to care for, mine to know, mine to remember. The kid came back to me in the end, chose to die in the place where it had been safe, with the one being who knew its whole story. That means something. I don't know exactly what, but it means something. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all I needed to know. I still walk down to the river sometimes, to the spot where I pulled that small, struggling figure from the water 3 decades ago. I stand there and remember that moment of decision, that instant when I chose connection over protocol, protection over discovery. I'd make the same choice again. Every single time. That's my truth. That's my story. And now it's yours too. Whatever you choose to believe, whatever you choose to do with this information, I just wanted someone to know. The kid existed. Our bond was real, and for 30 years, I kept that secret because some things are too precious to share. Until now, until the end.